Welcome to episode 3 of the Raven Lunatics. I'm Dwight McPherson, comic book creator, writer, editor, all-around comic guy, and I'm joined by...
I'm Chris Sentner, the curator of the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia.
Awesome.
And tonight's guest is Jeff Jerome.
That's right. And Jeff is a past curator of the Poe House in Baltimore, Maryland, and he did this for like over 30 years. And as you'll see, he is very, very passionate about Poe still. So we are thrilled to have him. So take it away, Chris.
Well, this is Chris Sentner at the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Richmond with Jeff Jerome, the curator emeritus of the Poe House and Museum of Baltimore. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I always enjoy talking about Poe and myself sometimes. I'm the curator emeritus of the Poe House, as Chris said. I've been interested in Edgar Allan Poe since I was about 10 years old, and my inspiration was the old Vincent Price, Roger Corman films. That's what really piqued my interest in Poe. And in 1976, I began volunteering at the Old Westminster Church in Baltimore, where Poe is buried. And in 1979, I became the first curator of the Poe House in Baltimore. And the Poe House in Baltimore is where Poe lived from approximately 1833 to 1835. And in 2013, I retired from the Poe House. But I still love Poe, and I think I always will be talking about Poe. I have so much knowledge up here about Poe, and I enjoy sharing it with people, which is why I'm in Richmond today, volunteering at the Poe Museum this weekend, talking about Poe's death and some of the other myths and legends surrounding Poe's life.
And he's also loaned us some pieces from his collection for our exhibit of Unsolved Mysteries of Edgar Allan Poe. There are 2 bottles of cognac and a note left by the Poe toaster. But who's the Poe toaster?
Start from the beginning. When I first became the curator of the Poe House, I did a lot of research. And I came across this newspaper article from 1949 in the Sun papers, and they were interviewing a pastor of the Westminster Church. And in this article, he mentions, I forget the exact words, but I'm paraphrasing, that the person who leaves the fine bottle of liquor on Poe's grave is probably doing it as a joke. And this was Poe's birthday, January 19th. So being young and foolish at that time, I thought, I wonder if it's still going on. So in 1977, I sat in my car in front of the Poe grave, and around 4 o'clock in the morning, Major called. I needed to find a men's room. So I walked across the street to the hospital, and I came back, and there it was, an expensive bottle of cognac and 3 red roses. Well, my eyes popped out, I started shaking, and I thought, it's still going on since 1949. So since then, I've been spending the night among the dead in the graveyard with volunteers, hoping to witness this person. We never made any attempt to identify or to hinder his tribute, but we have seen him. It's not a joke or a publicity stunt. And he always leaves 3 roses and a half-filled bottle of French cognac. Now, the name Poe Toaster actually was created by the media because the bottle's half empty. And cognac is something that you would use to toast someone. So obviously he drank some of it, and the media called him the Poe Toaster. So that he was toasting to the memory of Poe with this cognac. So it stopped in 2009, but before it stopped, one year we received a note with the roses that the torch will be passed. Some traditions must end and others take their place. To me, that was kind of cryptic. And so the following year, a different person showed up, and we didn't know what to make of it. As it turned out, we discovered that it was a father and sons, 2 sons tradition. The father apparently became ill and passed away, and the 2 sons continued with this tribute, and they stopped in 2009. Maybe they just got tired of fighting the crowd, trying not to be photographed. But 2009 is also, or was, the bicentennial of Poe's birth, and I think they just decided to stop it on some kind of anniversary. So I have all these bottles of cognac in my cellar, and I've loaned 2 of them to the Poe Museum here for their exhibit, Unexplained Mysteries of Poe. So this tribute garnered international coverage. And it's funny because it seems like almost every country that prints this story in January changes the liquor to suit the national taste. For example, I had some Russians visit the Poe House in 1985, and they read in their communist newspaper, Pravda, about this tribute where the man left 3 red roses and a half-filled bottle of Russian vodka. Okay, and I said, no, not vodka, cognac, French cognac. And they got angry. They said, no, Pravda say Russian vodka, and they were angry. So they left the Poe House angry. So what happens is the newspapers changed the liquor to suit the national taste. So in Russia, the person left Russian vodka. So that way people in Russia can say, he's one of us, good, good, good. In Japan, the person leaves sake. France is the only country that doesn't change the liquor because it is French cognac. So it is a nice tribute to Poe. It gained Poe and the Poe grave international coverage for, well, since 1949. And all good things must come to an end, and it did end in 2009. So there you go.
But they're still having ceremonies at the grave every birthday.
Oh, well, we've been honoring. Oh, yeah.
Honor.
Yeah, we've been celebrating Poe's, well, ever since I became the curator, 1979, we've had a birthday party for Poe on Poe's birthday, January 19th. And we've had singers, we've had actors, we've had Poe impersonators, we've had music. And at one point, we expanded to an entire weekend, but that was just too much for us to do with just a limited amount of volunteers. So when I left in 2013, that sort of left a gap. There was nobody there at the Poe House to continue this tradition. So I've been continuing it, not on such a grand scale, but we do gather at Poe's grave on January 19th, or if the 19th falls during the week, we use the weekend closest to that. And we still celebrate Poe. We have a birthday cake designed from one of his stories. We have actors, we've had music. One year we had Poe's mother appear, who was a singer, and paid her tribute to Poe. And even on Poe's death date, October 7th, we celebrate his death. It sounds funny. Poe's dead, yeah.
You had a funeral in style, didn't you?
Oh, I tell you,
Mannequin.
in 2009, we have held a funeral for Edgar Allan Poe in Baltimore. And we had a hearse, horse-drawn hearse. We had a replica of Poe's corpse created. We had him in a coffin. We had a 24-hour viewing at the Poe House. We had people, nonstop people coming to the Poe House from, I believe it was 10 a.m. in the morning to 12 midnight. And then Poe's funeral, we had a funeral procession from the Poe House to the Westminster Church, where Poe is buried. And we had a bagpipe band. We closed off all the streets with a police escort. We had several hundred people following Poe's casket to the Westminster grave. So we've been honoring Poe for many, many years, as do other cities honor Poe. And I mean, here in Richmond, you guys do a bang-up job of celebrating Poe. A weekend, a whole weekend, and you know, and I always want to come here, but I can't because we're doing our event in Baltimore. So it's amazing. Poe died in 1849, and here it is, 2018, and we're still celebrating Poe on such a grand scale. And I don't think people will ever get tired of Edgar Allan Poe. Do you?
No,
No.
keeps getting reinvented for every new age, every new generation. You always see something else in Poe, and for some reason, kids always think he's an author that's their parents won't like him, so it's cool to like him. He writes about maybe the darker side of life. He's the James Dean of American literature.
Well, you're right. Kids today, well, not just today, but I mean, look at me when I was 10 years old, watching the Vincent Price movies. These today they're kind of campy, but for the early 1960s, these were top-notch horror films. And here I was 10 years old, looking at Vincent Price up on the big screen, and I was just so captivated by that. And at that time, I had the same image of Poe that all kids do. He was strange, bizarre, and it wasn't until many years later that I discovered that Edgar Allan Poe wasn't this strange, weird, dope-addicted madman that wrote stories. He was probably one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. But he did write horror stories, but he wrote comedies, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, science fiction.
Satire, romance.
Yeah, he wrote about space travel. Well, people didn't think his comedies were that funny. His science fiction was so advanced for the time period that people said, what are you talking about, traveling to the moon in a balloon? That's impossible. But, and I think you'll agree with me, Chris, when you write about premature burial, murder, torture, obsession, superstition, I like that.
Yeah.
Even today, people love that stuff. And Poe just didn't dream this stuff up. What's that term we use today? Ripped from today's headlines. Many of his stories were based on actual occurrences, like being buried alive. It did happen. People were accidentally buried alive by doctors who couldn't tell if someone was dead, or family who thought the person was dead. And Poe incorporated this theme in many of his stories because it seemed like everybody knew someone who was related to someone who heard about someone that lived next door to someone that was buried alive. Everybody had a story to tell. So he incorporated that theme in many of his stories, not because he was obsessed with it, we were. And we couldn't get enough of it.
And he's also looking at the murders that are making the headlines, the murder of Mary Rogers. James Wood was convicted of murdering his family. He tried to get off on an insanity defense.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a few years before Poe wrote The Telltale Hearts about a murderer who's, is he insane? Is he not? He keeps telling us he's not insane.
Now, wasn't that the first time the insanity plea was introduced? Isn't that the
I'm not
first
sure it was
time?
the first time or not, but it was an early use of it.
Yeah.
It didn't work for him. But they're all dead now.
Yes, well, it worked for Poe, using that insanity. It's like, I didn't do it, something made me do it. And, but Poe's stories were so believable. Well, he wrote that one story about someone being mesmerized, hypnotized beyond death. And he wrote with such a perceived knowledge that people thought it really did happen. Was it in Sweden? Some doctors wrote a letter to Poe saying, hey, we knew this could happen. Thank you for and Poe said, it's a humbug. Don't believe it. I don't believe it. And he never heard from those doctors again.
Well, the spiritualists thought that this guy found a way to tap into the other side and communicate with the dead. It made into the medical journals in England, the popular record of modern science. People thought this was a real story about a way we could actually save someone from the jaws of death. And there was even a doctor who wrote to Poe and said that one of his patients drank himself to death and he's able to revive him using Poe's techniques. And Poe thought it was hilarious that people actually believed it.
Well, Poe really had a good imagination, but he also had talent and he had knowledge. Poe read everything he could. For someone who didn't finish college, which wasn't his fault, Poe was just brilliant. When you read the topics that he wrote about, well, being mesmerized and writing again with such perceived knowledge of medical hypnotism and having a doctor on hand as a witness And it sounds so believable, like we just said, people thought it really did happen. And the guy was just a genius for someone who was always struggling with poverty, hunger, being abused by the Northern literary establishment. Poe was a genius. I can't think of any other way to describe him. And he had a very tragic life, and it seemed like he could never get a break. And then dying the way he did was just, it's heartbreaking when you read about Poe. But despite all of this, when he picked up his pen and he sat down and applied himself, he created masterpieces. Now, I don't know if we should tell the public this, but not everything that Poe wrote was a masterpiece.
Well, few of his stories didn't come out quite as well as he'd like.
Yeah, but overall, when you read like the Mask of the Red Death, the Fall of the House of Usher, the Cask of Amontillado, and you can go on and on. These are masterpieces, and these were written in 1840s and some in the 1830s, and here it is, 2018 again, and they're still popular. People still read these stories, and it just captivates them because it could happen today. Just change a few of the things in the stories, and these things could be happening today.
Well, it's weird. They're still making movies of these.
Yes.
Still making video games of Poe stories. You can play the Murders in the Rue Morgue video game, or play the Mask of the Red Death board game, and they're still being reinvented. They're still topical today. They're still here in the now. When we heard about the Ebola outbreak, and people were terrified. What if Ebola comes to town, and who knows what's going to happen? Well, Poe wrote The Mask of the Red Death back in 1842, and that was about an outbreak of this virus. They didn't know how to stop it, where it was coming from. The king and his court all hid out in their castle to escape it, but no matter where they went, they couldn't escape this bloody red death. They're bleeding from their pores. It almost sounded like Ebola.
Yeah.
But it's something that Poe knew himself. He'd survived the great cholera epidemic of 1832. He was in Baltimore at the time, and he knew what it was like to live in fear of having the next
Thousands
outbreak.
of people died. Thousands of people died, and he was living right in this epidemic. So he capitalized on current events, but the guy really had knowledge, and he used it very wisely. And many people think, suppose Poe didn't die in Baltimore. Suppose someone sponsored him. Would he have continued writing the way he did? Or did he reach his peak died? What do you think? Do you think if he had lived just a few more years that we would have had more masterpieces, or was he sort of leveling out?
I think he was at the top of his form because died 1849. That was the year he published Annabel Lee, one of his greatest poems. The Bells was published that year. To My Mother, which you don't hear about that much, but Hot Frog. Some of his best works were coming out right at the end of his life. And for the first time in his life, if he had been able to settle down, find a financial backer, start his own magazine, and he'd had that leisure time to devote himself to writing, maybe he could have produced some more Annabel Lees, some more Bells. He was writing the best poetry he'd written since The Raven. Maybe even a little bit better than The Raven.
Poe needed an agent. He needed someone to say, Edgar, you sit and write, I'll sell you. I'll make you famous, all right? Poe didn't have an agent. He did all of this himself. He had to sell it himself, and many times, as you know, he got ripped off, he got cheated. And the publishers in that time period, they took advantage of Poe. Not only Poe, but other writers that were struggling. They got ripped off, they got cheated. Many times, Poe was paid in books. Try to pay the rent with books and see how far you get with that. So, it's just really sad, the life that he had. And it just makes you wonder, if he didn't die, what other masterpieces would he have created?
But I think in a way, the life he had really made his work possible. If he had just lived off his foster father's wealth and published volumes of poetry. He could have written more Tamerlanes, these long epic poems, or Al-Araf, which one of the critics said the thing he most enjoyed about Al-Araf is he could burn up in the fire. But because he worked for the magazines, because he made his living trying to sell magazines, he knew he had to tap into the audience, and he always had to write with the audience in mind, how they're going to react to his stories. And he knew how to sell magazines. Some of the journals where he worked became the most popular in the country, like Graham's, and the Southern Literary Messenger became the leading journal in the South. And he was able to sell to Godey's Lady's Book, the most popular magazine in the country. So he knew how to write stories that really tapped into the emotions of the readers, and how to manipulate those emotions. So it hadn't been for him having to make a living, having to write for magazines, having to know that's how I'm going to feed myself, that's how I'm going to pay the rent. He wouldn't have had that need to keep reinventing. Oh, I'm going to do science fiction today. I'm writing about trips to the moon today. I'm going to write about a mystery today. I write about a razor blade wielding orangutan today. He had to keep inventing and reinventing himself, refusing to do what he'd done before. He wrote to one of his editors that not one of my stories will be like the other one. I'm going to keep giving you new and different content. To be appreciated, you must be read. So they're not going to appreciate your work unless you grab their attention and read it. And he's still grabbing people's attention today. Even people who see it in movies or television, those hopefully lead them back to the books where they can read the stories of the original, because there's no substitute for the original story in print.
Excellent points, Chris. Excellent points. And again, you touched upon what we spoke about earlier, that even today, Poe is still popular and getting more and more popular. And I mean, I've got 35 some years experience with Poe, beginning at the cemetery and at the house, and I've been able to see the interest, and it's never wavered. It's never been a time where people just weren't interested in Poe, because every year you have a new set of young people reaching puberty, discovering Poe. And this guy is great. I love this, murder, torture. Kids love it, and I did, and that's what I'm here today, because of these Vincent Price movies, the Roger Corman films. And I've met other people that are my age that feel the same way. They were introduced to Poe through these old Roger Corman films. So Poe's fame is secure. It will never waver. It will never weaken. If anything, it will grow stronger, because we have places like the Poe Museum here in Richmond, Poe House in Baltimore, the Poe House in Philadelphia, the Poe Cottage in New York, and I think you're seeing record attendance. It's never ending. People are just so excited about Poe, and here at my advanced age, I'm still excited about Poe. I'm retired, but here I'm in Richmond talking about Poe because I like sharing my knowledge about Poe, and there's a willing audience. Young people like to ask questions, and sometimes their teacher doesn't know enough, or they have wrong information about Poe. So when they come to a place like the Poe Museum, where you have people that know what they're talking about, it's like right before we sat down for this, I was talking to this young girl and her mom, and she came here doing the school report. And as I was talking to her, I started going in all directions with Poe. You should have seen the expression on her face. She was like, "Oh, this is, really exciting talking to someone that knows what they're talking about when it comes to Poe." So I'm going to continue sharing my knowledge with Poe as long as I'm able to. And as long as there are places like the Poe House in Baltimore, the Poe Grave, the Poe Museum here in Richmond, I think Poe's fame is secure. Easily.
Now, you had the unique experience of having been the curator of the Poe House for 30 plus years, and being the one who gets to turn on the lights in the morning. What was one of your most memorable experiences of being there in Poe's house?
Gosh.
You lived there longer than he did.
Well, that's true. And people thought I lived in the basement. I had people coming to the Poe House going, not knowing I was the curator, saying, "Does the curator live in the basement?" I said, "I don't think so, but that's what I read. Someone told me that." I said, "Well, the ceiling is like 5 foot tall, got pipes running through it. I really don't think he lives in the basement." "Oh, but I think he does." So I didn't have the nerve to say, "Well, I'm the curator and I don't live here." But I think you never know who is going to walk through that door. When someone knocks on the door and you open it, you never know who you're going to meet, who will be standing there. I've met so many actors, famous people, if you will, coming to the Poe House, and they all share the same love of Poe. So there's no one incident that I can say, "Oh yeah, back in 1990, this happened to me," because every day that I was there was an exciting day. And yes, I was there in the morning, in the evening. I was there one whole weekend, beginning Friday afternoon to Sunday morning, because we had the telephone lines accidentally cut, which turned off the alarm system. So the phone company kept saying, "Well, the guy's coming out in the next 4 hours," and that went on for like 2 days. But I stayed there because the house had no security system, and we had artifacts there that we just couldn't take a chance. So I've made some big sacrifices in my life for the Poe House, and I'm sure you've done a lot of things here that have gone above and beyond the call of duty. Yeah, when I go to the Poe House now, it's a part of me. I can't divorce myself of the Poe House, saying, "Well, I'm not there anymore, forget about it." So I still care about the house, and I go there and I look at the exhibits and I go, "I don't know if I like this exhibit too much," but that's just my personal opinion. So I'm still excited about Poe. When I visit the Poe House in Philadelphia, I'm excited there also. Every day was an adventure at the Poe House in Baltimore. Every day.
And now you're at the cemetery, and that's a must-see stop on any Poe pilgrimage.
Oh, yes, because we have Poe's body, and we have 2 graves, counting 2 graves of Edgar Allan Poe. The original grave and his second grave. Poe died in 1849 in Baltimore by coincidence, and he was recognized, and they took him to the hospital where he spent several days in and out of delirium, and he finally died. Now, I'm giving a real quick sketch of what happened. But he was recognized. The Poe family is from Baltimore, and they took him to the hospital, like I said, several days in and out of delirium, unable to explain what had happened to him, and he finally died, and they buried him in the Westminster graveyard in his grandfather's plot. So originally, he was buried with the grandfather, the grandmother, and his brother Henry, 1849. In 1875, they moved Poe's body from the back of the cemetery to where it is now at the entrance. So when you walk into the graveyard today, the Poe monument is right there. You can't miss it. And under that monument is Edgar, his Aunt Maria Clem, and his wife Virginia. So that was in 1875 is when they moved Poe's body. So when you visit the cemetery today, you'll see not only the second grave of Poe, but you'll see the original grave of Poe. There's a stone with a raven carved into it in the back of the cemetery. Then we have the catacombs underneath Westminster Church. If you like dark, dank, dusty basements with tombstones and mausoleums, this is the place you want to visit. And they do give tours there on a regular basis. And you can visit www.westminsterhall.org for tour information. But the cemetery is open on a daily basis, usually from sunrise to sunset. So it's a nice little graveyard, and right in the middle of downtown Baltimore.
And when do you plan the birthday this year? It's usually the Saturday closest
to the 19th. And I believe the 19th might be on a Sunday next year. So it will fall on a weekend, and we are planning to have a musical with dance tribute to Poe, and we have a local musician who wrote a piece, and we're waiting to get funding for it. So it looks like we're not sure if it's January, Saturday, January 17th or 18th. We're not sure which date we're going to do yet, but it will be inside the old Westminster Hall, and we have wreath laying ceremony, Poe grave. We have this Poe cake with a Poe theme made. One year we made the casket Amontillado cake. It was a flat cake with bricks and an opening with someone's eyes peeking out. One year we created a book with the raven on it. It weighed about 10 pounds, made out of cake. So it's a big celebration in Baltimore. We have people coming from all around the country and sometimes the world to come to Baltimore to celebrate Poe. And I'm really annoyed with Richmond because they have your birthday celebration at the same time that I have mine in Baltimore, and I can't visit yours.
Well, it's kind of Poe's fault for being born there.
I
got two graves, you could have two birthdays.
I guess, but I mean, you have terrific events here also, and it's like all day.
Oh yeah, we stay open until midnight.
Yeah.
We try to have some kind of event every hour on the hour, whether it's a musician or a Poe performer or a film or a tour, a historical interpreter. And then the stroke of midnight, we all have our champagne toasts in the Poe Shrine. And people come from out of town, stick around for the whole thing.
I would, if I could, I would spend the day here. So those of you that are listening to us and watching us, you got two choices on Poe's birthday. You can come to Baltimore, or you can come to Richmond, or catch Baltimore first. Yeah, because we do our event usually in the afternoon, 2, 3, 4 o'clock. Come to our event, and Richmond is right down the road from Baltimore. Come here.
2.5 hours you'll be here.
Yeah, the country road drive. And so make a weekend of it, and you'll have so much fun because Baltimore loves Poe, Richmond loves Poe, and as long as you've got, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Chris, as long as you've got people like Chris here doing these, the brains behind these events, along with your dedicated staff, and as long as you've got me in Baltimore, you've got two fantastic venues celebrating the life of Poe. And I'll tell you right now, you attend these events, you're having fun. You will not see a scholar at one of our events talking about Poe's theory of the universe. And we don't do that. And we have fun, like Chris said, with performances, music, champagne toast at midnight. You got to come and visit the next time you're on the East Coast.
Well, thank you for speaking with us today.
Sure. I enjoyed it. Always enjoyed talking about Poe.
And this is Jeff Jerome. I'm Chris Sentner for the Raven Lunatics. And back to you, Dwight.
Thanks, Chris. And thanks, Jeff Jerome. That is a fantastic interview. You did a great job, Chris.
Thanks.
It's awesome to see that he's still so passionate about Poe after all these years. And he's a wonderful, member of the Poe community. So thank you to Jeff Jerome. He runs a page over at Facebook called Edgar Allan Poe Evermore. You should go check it out and like it. And he posts a ton of pictures. Am I right?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
And he's actually spent the whole weekend down at the Poe Museum just talking to anybody who's interested about his bottles of Poe toaster cognac and the note that the Poe toaster left. And those are going to be on display indefinitely. He's decided to extend the loan of those artifacts to the museum.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I mean, like we were saying, that's part of the heritage. And I love that, the Roger Corman films were what got him hooked, just like me. His first taste of Poe that sparked that interest to pursue his work later on in life. So that's awesome. And I mean, and then to be the curator of the Poe House in Baltimore, sparked by a filmmaker, so that's very cool. That's very cool.
Well, if anybody's interested in seeing any of the Roger Corman movies, they play pretty regularly on cable. But if you're in the Richmond area this week, we'll be showing The Raven with Vincent Price, directed by Roger Corman, and also featuring Boris Karloff and Peter Lorre, and a young Jack Nicholson from the 1960s. That'll be playing at the Bird Theater, 10 o'clock on Thursday. And immediately before that, at 8 o'clock at Babes of Carytown, Victoria Price, who's Vincent Price's daughter, will be reading from her latest book. So it's going to be a full evening of Poe and Price activities on the 19th. That's this Thursday. And then the following week on the 26th, we have the first unhappy hour of the season at the Poe Museum. We'll have live music, cash bar, and it's kind of like a happy hour, except very, very miserable. So come out and get depressed with all of us and just have an awful time.
Nice. That's a great advertisement, you know. Unhappy hour. Should do a television commercial with everybody wearing black and talking about how miserable they'll be at unhappy hour. That's funny. So what else? Is there anything else coming up at the Poe Museum that people should know about?
Yeah, we're extending our Unsolved Mysteries of Edgar Allan Poe exhibit until June, and that will be followed by Poe Beyond Horror. It'll be an exhibit focusing on the non-horror Poe stories, like his comedies and his science fiction. So if you think you know Poe, think again. You'll see a whole different side of him at the Poe Museum.
That is cool. Scientists need to hurry up and get that transporter done so I can just transport over there and go to all these awesome, activities you guys have got going on. So, between Baltimore and Richmond, like Jeff was saying, I mean, it's a Poe lover's paradise. So, with me, what I've got coming up on May 1st is we're going to be revealing the cover to The Imaginary Voyages of Edgar Allan Poe #4 by John Boy Myers. And John Boy has done work for DC and Marvel. I mean, he's a big name. He's a superstar artist. We'll be revealing that cover on May 1st. And then on June 1st, we'll kick off the Kickstarter. Not to be redundant, but for The Imaginary Voyages of Edgar Allan Poe #4. So, the campaigns have been wonderful. We've gotten wonderful feedback. We have a fantastic fan base that's been supporting us, and like we're doing here, right? Everybody loves Poe. Everybody loves Poe, and that's why the books have been doing so well. You bring a fan base in. People already know Poe and they enjoy Poe, like we've talked about before. So you have a built-in.
Really easy.
It really does. It really does. So it's just wonderful to me to hear from educators that are saying, wow, this book, we're actually using it in our classroom. So, as a companion for Poe's works. So, I mean, that is the ultimate to me, to actually have my work used in that way. So, yeah, all for Poe, right?
Yeah. And it's also for the next generation. Poe's out there inspiring young minds, whether they go into writing or science or technology. Poe's there to help inspire them and show them how to make this a better world.
That's right.
And if anybody out there in YouTube land has some other Poe events going on, put them down in the comments or let Dwight know, and be glad to spread the word about any Poe activity that's going on.
Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, we are a community. I feel like, Chris, you see people every day that are there for Poe. And I encounter, of course, a lot of people on social media that are Poe fans. So, we are a community. I'd like to see us, be able to manifest that somewhat, to have a place where every Poe fan can go. And we're, Chris and I are brainstorming on this, but we'll just leave it at that for now. So that's all we've got for this week. And we appreciate you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, tell your enemies about it. Join us next week. And what are we going to talk about next week, Chris?
I don't know yet. It's a mystery. I guess we'll probably be talking about Poe.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we'll be talking about Poe. And I keep saying next week. I mean, next episode in 2 weeks. So I wanted to be clear about that. So thank you for watching the Raven Lunatics. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.